Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're cracking open our sources to really get under the hood of the Great Depression.
Yeah, we want to go beyond just, the stock market crash.
Exactly. Our mission here is to unpack the deeper causes, the economic shifts, the instability, and how it all just completely reshaped America.
And it's fascinating, isn't it, how you go from the roaring 20s, all that glitz and confidence,
Right.
to suddenly mass poverty, despair. It happens so fast.
Right.
But, our sources show that the prosperity was kind of deceptive.
Deceptive how?
Well, the U.S. was in this huge transition, shifting from mostly rural farms, to cities, factories, industry, a massive change. But that whole process, it left the economy uh, structurally fragile,
Yeah.
full of hidden cracks.
Okay, structural fragility, hidden cracks beneath the boom. I
Oh.
like that. So let's unpack this. What were those cracks? What were the big warning signs everyone missed?
Well, one of the clearest signs was how uneven everything was. I mean, sure, cities were booming, industries were making fortunes, but that wealth, it wasn't really spreading out. The sources are pretty clear. It was heavily concentrated, like the top 5% held most of it.
So a few people getting incredibly rich, but most people not really seeing it.
Pretty much. And while the cities looked wealthy out in the countryside, things were really tough.
Which brings us to the farms, right? That seems to be a major weak point.
Absolutely. That's probably the first major structural weakness we need to talk about. Agricultural overproduction and just crippling debt.
Okay.
See, during World War I and right after, demand for American food was huge. Europe needed it. So farmers, they borrowed money, bought new tractors, expanded.
Makes sense. Meet the demand.
Right. But then Europe started recovering, growing its own food again. Demand dropped. But American farmers, they kept producing at those high levels.
Whoa. Way too much supply, not enough demand.
And prices just collapsed. Farmers couldn't pay back those loans they'd taken out for the new equipment.
Leading to foreclosures, bankruptcies. A disaster in the making for a huge part of the country.
Exactly. And here's where that uneven wealth concentration really bites the industrial side. If farmers have no money because crop prices crashed,
They can't buy the cars and radios the factories are churning out.
precisely, you had massive industrial output, but not enough people with money to actually buy it all. Underconsumption, they called it. The purchasing power just wasn't there across the board.
So the whole industrial boom was kind of built on shaky ground, needing more and more buyers, but the system itself wasn't giving enough people the income to buy things.
You got it. A system just waiting for a trigger. And funny enough, a big part of that trigger came from policy trying to fix the problem.
You mean tariffs?
Yep. That brings us right to the second factor. High tariffs and, well, global economic isolation. The big one here is the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act of 1930.
Infamous. I've definitely heard of it. What exactly did it do that was so bad?
Well, the idea was to protect American businesses, farmers included, from foreign competition by slapping these huge taxes, tariffs on imported goods. We're
Sure.
talking over 20,000 different items. Record amounts.
Okay, trying to force people to buy American, what was the reaction overseas?
Predictable, really. Other countries got mad and hit back. They put huge tariffs on American goods.
So trade just seized up.
It cratered. Global trade just plummeted. And this is crucial context, right? After World War I, the U.S. was the world's biggest creditor, owed tons of money by European nations.
Right, they owed us war debts.
Exactly. But think about it. How can they pay us back dollars if we refuse to buy their stuff?
So Smoot-Hawley basically made it impossible for them to earn the dollars they needed to pay their debts to us.
Precisely. It locked down the whole system. It deepened the depression everywhere, including right back here at home. It was a policy born from weakness that just made everything worse.
Wow. Okay, so we have structural weakness in farming and wealth distribution made worse by bad trade policy. Let's shift gears, though, because then there's the whole Wall Street angle. Speculation, the greed.
Yeah, that's the third major factor, stock market instability and speculation. The market in the late 20s, it wasn't really about investing anymore for a lot of people. It was gambling, pure overconfidence.
And where did all that money come from if wealth was so concentrated?
Well, that's part of it. All that money held by the top few percent. It wasn't all going into building new factories because, remember, people weren't buying enough stuff. So where does it go?
Into the stock market, chasing quick returns.
Exactly. It poured into speculation. And the riskiest part was this thing called buying on margin.
Okay, break that down. What did buying on margin actually mean for people?
Imagine you want to buy, say, $1,000 worth of stock. Buying on margin meant you might only put down $100 of your own money, 10%,
And borrow the other $900. From who?
from the stockbroker. The loan was backed only by the stock itself. The assumption was the stock price would just keep going up forever.
Okay, sounds incredibly risky. What happens if the stock price drops?
Ah, that's the killer. If it dropped even a little bit, the broker issues a margin call. They demand you repay the entire loan immediately.
And if you don't have $900 lying around?
They sell your stock instantly at whatever low price it is to cover the loan, which of course pushes the price down even further. It was, like you said, a house of cards built on borrowed money and just blind optimism.
And that house came crashing down. Black Tuesday, October 29th, 1929.
Yep. The crash itself didn't cause the depression alone. The weaknesses were already there, remember? But as the trigger, billions in paper wealth just vanished overnight. Panic selling took over. Confidence evaporated.
And this connects directly to that fourth factor you mentioned earlier, the uneven wealth and people relying so much on credit.
Absolutely. Because most ordinary Americans weren't playing the market. They relied on their wages, which weren't rising much, and increasingly on consumer credit, buying cars, radios, furniture on installment plans.
So when the crash hit and companies started getting nervous, laying people off,
People slammed their wallets shut. They stopped buying anything non-essential because they were scared about their jobs or they'd already lost them, and they couldn't pay their existing credit bills.
which hammers the businesses who made the goods.
And the banks who held the loans. Businesses lay off more workers, banks start failing.
Right.
It becomes this catastrophic downward spiral. Demand collapses, production collapses, credit freezes. That's the feedback loop that really drove the economy into the ground.
The effects sound immediate and just devastating. Let's talk about that, the sheer human cost, the societal impact right after the collapse.
Well, the first thing to go really was the banking system. You had these widespread bank failures, panics. Remember, there was no FDIC back then, no federal deposit insurance.
So if you heard your bank might be in trouble.
You ran down there to get your money out.
Yeah.
And these bank runs just caused thousands of banks, even healthy ones sometimes, to close their doors for good. People's life savings, gone, just vanished.
Unbelievable. And with banks failing and credit gone, factories.
They shut down. Or they drastically cut production. Which leads directly to the next huge effect, mass unemployment.
The numbers are just hard to fathom today.
They really are. By 1933, the worst point, estimates are around 25% of the entire workforce was unemployed. 1 in 4 people.
1 in 4.
And in some communities, particularly African American and Latino communities who were often the first fired, those rates could be 50% or even higher. Just absolute economic devastation with no real safety net.
No unemployment benefits back then, right?
Nope. Nothing like we have today. If you lost your job, you were on your own. Maybe some local charity, but the scale was just overwhelming.
Which led to homelessness, poverty.
Widespread. People lost their homes, got evicted. You started seeing these shanty towns spring up on the edges of cities, built out of scrap wood, cardboard, whatever people could find. They bitterly nicknamed them Hoovervilles.
After President Hoover, who was in office when it all hit the fan.
Exactly. And beyond the physical hardship, you can't underestimate the psychological impact. The sources talk about this deep despair, this sense of shame, especially for men who were seen as the breadwinners and suddenly couldn't provide.
A feeling of betrayal, maybe? Like the system had failed them?
Completely betrayed by the economy, by the government. A profound loss of faith and a deep uncertainty about the future. It really shook the nation to its core.
That public mood, that despair, really sets the stage for the political shift, doesn't it? The move from Hoover to Roosevelt. How did Hoover initially respond to all this?
Well, Hoover came into it, the very traditional 19th century mindset. He believed in rugged individualism. He thought the economy would, and frankly should, fix itself.
Self-correction.
Yeah. And he genuinely feared that direct federal handouts, what they called the dole, would make people dependent on the government, undermine the American spirit.
So what did he try?
His main approach initially was voluntary cooperation. He urged business leaders not to cut wages, pleaded with local governments and charities to step up relief efforts. But the problem was just too big. Industry-wide unemployment couldn't be solved by local soup kitchens.
But he did eventually do some federal things, right? Like the RFC.
He did, yes, the Reconstruction Finance Corporation. That was a big move for him, actually. The RFC was set up to lend government money to banks, railroads, big corporations. The idea was to stabilize the top of the economy.
Trickle-down economics, basically.
That was the theory. Prop up the big institutions, and the benefits would eventually trickle down to everybody else. The problem was, it was too slow. People were starving now.
And it looked bad, right? Government helping big banks while people were living in Hoovervilles.
Exactly. It made Hoover look uncaring, out of touch. Public frustration just grew and grew, setting the stage for the 1932 election.
Enter Franklin D. Roosevelt, FDR. He campaigned on a very different message.
Completely different. He promised bold experimentation, direct federal action. He promised a new deal for the American people. His victory was a landslide. It wasn't just swamping parties. It was a fundamental shift in what Americans expected from their government.
A mandate for change? A demand for protection?
Absolutely. The public was essentially saying, the old way doesn't work. We need the federal government to step in.
So what did that mean in practice? What was the core of this New Deal idea in response to the Depression?
Well, it meant a whole wave of new federal programs. Things like the CCC, the Civilian Conservation Corps, putting young men to work in parks. Unemployment insurance started to come in. And eventually, the big one, Social Security.
Programs that provided direct relief, jobs, and a safety net.
Right. It wasn't just about temporary fixes. It was about building a permanent, though limited, welfare state. Establishing the idea that the federal government had a responsibility to protect citizens from utter economic ruin.
It really redefined the whole relationship between Washington and the average American.
It absolutely did. The Depression basically proved that in a complex, modern industrial economy, disasters could happen on a scale that individuals, charities, even local governments just couldn't handle. The failure of the old system really necessitated a stronger federal role.
So looking back, the Great Depression wasn't just a crash. It was this painful exposure of all those underlying flaws. The farm debt, the concentrated wealth, the wild speculation.
Made so much worse by really bad policy, like Smoot-Hawley.
And it forced the U.S. to build a safety net where basically none had existed before. It was a brutal, transformative period.
Definitely. And that leads us to a final thought for you listening out there. Our sources really hammer home how that uneven wealth and the reliance on credit made the 20s economy so fragile.
Right.
So think about this. Given how that whole system of buying stocks on margin worked, the incredible mathematical fragility built on borrowed money, could the financial system ever have stabilized itself after the crash no matter what Hoover did? Did that inherent instability make the kind of government regulation and safety net we have today not just a good idea, but an absolute necessity, something to chew on?
A powerful question to end on. That's all the time we have for this deep dive. Thanks for joining us.